Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I think we're on. Happy Friday. Hope everyone's doing well. My name is Victor Davila. I am coming to you from the University of Central Florida, where I serve as an associate professor. And today, I am happy to be talking with Matt Dombrowski, who is a colleague of mine at the University of Central Florida. And we're going to be talking about Limitless Solutions, design for good, and whatever other randomness might fall into our heads. How you doing, Matt? I can't hear you. So
I'm doing good.
There we go. It has to happen once in like every Zoom meeting once a day, right? That we're muted. Full disclosure, Matt and I work together. We're both associate professors at the University of Central Florida. We are probably in the same building right now.
You're up there.
I am. So glad to have you here, Matt. First of all, so you're the creative director of Limbitless Solutions. So for those of you who don't know what Limitless Solutions is, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what it is and that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Limitless Solutions is really a great mission that I got involved with about going on 8 years ago now, where a few students a while back at the University of Central Florida got together and decided to use 3D printing to create a bionic prosthetic arm. And they gave that 3D printed arm to a young child at no charge. And the really cool part about this is prosthetics in the United States, especially, are highly expensive, especially for children who are growing at nonstop rates. So Limitless decided to use kind of the new technology of 3D printing to kind of solve that problem and make it more affordable, and in turn create free bionic arms for kids. And so on top of that, we created arms that were expressive. You could be your favorite superhero, and you could switch out what kind of prosthetic you're wearing. And we've been doing that ever since. So we've created a slew of arms. We actually started by giving an arm out with Robert Downey Jr., and we gave an Iron Man themed arm out, which was pretty awesome, to a young boy named Alex, who's not so young anymore. He's like, I think, a linebacker in high school now. He was like 7 at the time, 6 or 7. And that moment went viral, which really kind of elevated just, using design, using creative problem solving, and, also just multiple disciplines of creators to come together for the common good of design and helping underserved communities. So that's us in essentially a nutshell. We do a lot more, which I'm sure we'll dive into.
So that Robert Downey Jr. video is what introduced me to Limitless Solutions. So if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to Google it, look it up, and check it out. And so let's back up a little bit, because I know that we have a lot of students that may be joining us, or people who might just be they're sitting on a great idea. You mentioned that that a group of students, not even alumni, not even graduates, started Limitless Solutions. So for everyone who's sitting on an idea that they might want to take on to fruition, can you explain a little bit about how that happened, or why it happened, and how they actually got from being a student to where they are now?
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes, it's from Joseph Campbell, is, "If the path in front of you is clear, you're on somebody else's path." So, it's really poignant when we talk to our students here at UCF and any other creative. We tend to get into routines. We tend to follow other creatives and kind of go, okay, I like what they're doing. How can I kind of fit into that path? And so what happened was, the founder of Limitless, Albert Monero, was an aerospace student. Essentially, he wanted to create rocket ships and I can't even tell you half the stuff because it's just that above my artist mind. But he was listening to a radio interview about the exorbitant cost of prosthetic arms, and he connected with a parent who was in need, who couldn't obviously cover that for their child. And I'm a father, and Victor, you are too. We're both parents of 2 respective children. I guess 4 children. I guess that would make sense.
Yeah.
But we understand we'd do anything for our kids. And so Albert started this idea at his kitchen table, which is pretty amazing. And he got together with fellow engineers, and they created a prosthetic, and that prosthetic was 3D printed. It looked 3D printed. It kind of had that same filament type material, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And Albert's I always say I was very fortunate that he's married to an amazingly creative photographer, Katie. And Katie, graduated from the School of Visual Arts and Design here at UCF and mentioned you should reach out to the art department and see what could happen. Because what actually happened, and you know this, Victor, but the kid came back and they had decorated the prosthetic. So, put stickers on it, I think temporary tattoos, nail polish, all this stuff. And so that's kind of where I got involved. But the idea behind it was, when Albert started this, I think 3D printed prosthetics weren't like a huge thing. It was not something that people would, go, oh, that's my career path. That's what I'm going to get into. And I think as a creative, that's what makes our jobs so amazing, that we have the ability to, kind of use our instinct, use our creative intuition, and kind of point toward paths that maybe are less explored. And in turn, that ripple effect occurs and you can create some good in the world. So I always suggest to fellow creatives, like, it's scary. We've been told no more than we've been told yes doing this project. But in the end, this picture we brought up here that says it all. I mean, look at those faces and look at those smiles. And, it becomes kind of this amazing selfless act, which you see kind of moving, pushing forward and growing forward. And, we can talk about all that stuff too coming up, I'm sure. I mean, comic books and video games and, we call them bionic kids. We currently have a bionic kid who is now an intern at Limitless. So she started off being an arm recipient at, I think, 9 years old. And now she's like a UCF student and an intern. So talk about pay it forward. But yeah, don't let anyone tell you your ideas aren't good or that, it can't be done. It can't be done just means it hasn't been done yet. And that's our mindset. It's if you believe in something and you're creative, pursue it.
So we're talking about prosthetic arms. We're talking about bionic kids. Can you explain a little bit about what exactly is that we're talking about? What is a bionic arm and how does it work to, if you could explain some of that, or what are we talking about here?
Yeah. So, when we're talking about prosthetic arms, we mainly deal with individuals that have limb difference from roughly around a little bit under their shoulder to a little bit mid forearm. And some of the kids were born that way. Others may have lost the limb. A lot of them, though, it was ambiotic band syndrome, which again, when they were in their parents' belly, the umbilical cord may have wrapped around it, and it just may have happened in a weird way to say naturally. And so, typically the bionic arm that we make kind of fits that we call it the Goldilocks region. And the bionic arm is using EMG sensors, which are essentially 3 stickers that go on whatever muscle group they have available. And depending on how hard they flex their muscle, the arm will open and close, it will do a gesture, and it will kind of, actuate the arm. And then on top of that, when you can see in the picture right here that we did, we have one of our interns working with a little bionic kid here, painting one of the sleeves. We created magnetized sleeves. So a kid will come in, they'll be measured for their arm, they'll work with the medical professionals, and then they go to what I like to call like a Nike shoe selector, which is like a website where they pick the color, they pick the shape of their bionic sleeve and whatnot, and all the different color patterns, so they can fully customize it to whatever they want it to look like. And then those sleeves are printed and they're magnetized. So if you want to be, Iron Man one day and you want to be your favorite Halo character the next day, you can simply pop off the sleeves, pop new sleeves on top of it, and come up with your own styled look. So what we ended up doing was kind of taking these different design that's all around us, right? Things that like help you buy shoes. We took some thermoforming that is done typically in kind of industrial design, and we kind of started merging all these different mediums to kind of come, up with this user experience. And the kid comes in, they're fitted. They actually get a video game that they play to help them train how to use their muscle flex, because a lot of them aren't familiar with that flex. We can sit here and flex, but they haven't had that experience. And a really cool thing happened with all of this, and it ended up, the ability to pick things up was secondary to the empowerment and the inspiration that the kid got when they had their arm. And, here in this country, we, and really in the world, we sometimes often treat people with disabilities differently, or we don't talk to them or avoid conversation. And the really cool thing about these creative arms is, we ask the kids, do you want them to look like your skin tone or your color? And almost all of them have said no. I want to stand out. I want people to ask me about my arm. I want to talk about that arm and how we got to what it was. And we always tell this story about one of the kids who would walk behind his parent in the grocery store, because people would often ask what happened to you or what's wrong with you, or shy away from talking to them at all. But when they're wearing their prosthetic, that conversation turns into, that's amazing, oh my god, look at that, like show me how that works, I want one. And so it just shows how creativity can have like a really big tonal change to how we talk about typically tough subject matter, right? And so through visual storytelling and creativity, we can really have these tough conversations. And it just shows you the power of the artist in our society and why it's so needed.
In fact, earlier you mentioned that the students were, or the kids were putting stickers and making it, customizing their own arms. The original arms that Albert and that crew made was something more akin to something that looked like flesh, if I'm not mistaken, right? And that's
Yeah.
what they said, was like, no, we want something that's a little bit more unique and a little bit more us.
Yeah, and the Iron Man video obviously really kind of spawned that. But since then, we've partnered with Ubisoft. We have an Assassin's Creed arm. We have a handful of Halo arms. Master Chief. We have Riot video game arms. And so we've gotten the ability to work with some really generous and amazing partners. Microsoft we've partnered with as well, to kind of help design these prosthetic solutions. And the cool thing about those companies too, these are all highly branded, highly IP. They're very particular for their brand, but they've always let the kid customize the arm, which I always thought was cool. So if Master Chief wanted to be bright yellow and pink, they were like, go for it. Like, we're cool with that. So it really just shows you the generosity of the whole creative community and how we're kind of coming together. And when you find your why, when you find, what you're designing for and the person you're helping, it becomes really easy to kind of get others involved and amplify that. So
that's awesome. So one of the things, if anybody knows anything about higher ed and universities and things like that, is that we tend to be very siloed. And a lot of times the difference, I know it's a mystery, but a lot of times we don't
in the same building. But
I know. That's a good point. But a lot of times we don't necessarily talk to the experts that are in the building next to us. And one of the things that has always impressed me about Limitless is that they bring different disciplines and different experts together. Can you talk about that culture that you have at Limitless and how you do that, how you bring all those folks together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is good advice for a lot of people, but especially designers. You can't get much done if you don't ask, right? And so I mentioned a while ago that we've been told no quite a bit, but what we found is in the partnerships and the collaborations that we've kind of forged over the last couple of years, most people, we will always say, oh, why do you team up with us? We know we have a good mission, and we know, we work with some amazing people in the limb difference community, but, most of them just said, no one's ever asked us. And so, the same thing goes with the university. I am not a medical doctor. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not going to make those decisions when it comes to these bionic arms. Same with the engineering. But as I'll go to the physical therapy school. We'll go to the medical school. We'll talk to Orlando Health or Arnold Palmer, any of these kind of partners that we've worked with. And in turn, they come to us as the creative community and talk about that visual storytelling, that problem solving. And that, I'm a firm believer that no matter your discipline, you're creative, right? You may not be an artist, and that's okay. I mean, we need our job.
I agree.
But everyone has the ability to be creative. And that is kind of our common thread when we partner. And it's a bunch of people who think differently, which is fun sometimes and sometimes frustrating, right? But the idea is that's where innovation occurs, right? When you start melding different thoughts and different mindsets and different approaches creatively. And So, my advice is go out there and ask, right? It's scary. It's you have to be vulnerable. Again, we've been looked at multiple times going, you make what? Doing what? No, we don't want to do that. But then, you find the right partners to kind of dance with, so to speak. And,
Right.
it's just smooth. And that's when, this impact starts to occur, which is pretty cool. And when you see the kid get their arm for the first time and they light up, I mean, I always call it the limitless moment because, we get these over the past at least 8 years with me. I've had multiple limitless moments where I've just been, this is why I do what I do. And it's selfless and you're serving others. And on top of it, I get to share this with my students. We have over 55 student interns right now at Limitless that cover 9 different disciplines at colleges, multiple more disciplines than that at the university. So talking about breaking down silos, we have, if you can name the major, we probably have a way that the student can kind of help support the mission.
Yeah, because there's a few places that you can see a place that has a graphic designer collaborating with a mathematician, collaborating with a computer science student, collaborating with an engineer, and so on and so forth.
And it makes
so
total
it's truly
sense.
Collaborative. Yeah.
Because like you go to any outside of academia world and
Yeah.
you have these people, like you go to Lockheed Martin or any other big company, and they're going to be working side by side by a creative, by an artist, by an engineer. And again, we all speak our own unique languages, but there is also that shared language of creativity and storytelling that, has been passed down for generations. And, that's where we kind of help connect the dots, which has been really, really cool.
When I first started working with Limitless and it was intimidating because you go into a room and you're working with literal rocket scientists.
Yeah.
And you feel a little bit overwhelmed. You're like, how did I get here? What am I going to do? But it's a very collaboratory experience. Everybody respects the expertise of the others. So you find your niche and you kind of go with it, and you realize that you're doing your part for the greater good, for the greater kind of community. And one of the things that you and I have talked about, one of the things that we kind of paraphrase when we're trying to explain Limitless is that the Pixar adage, where the art influences the technology and the technology influences the art. And I think that's really evident in what Limitless does. With apologies to Pixar and me butchering their slogan or whatever it is.
Would be very upset right now.
Right. Exactly. So on that note, you're the creative director. Can you talk a little bit about creativity at Limitless and what you do as a creative director?
Yeah, I think I always say this to Albert, and there's semesters where I'm super hands-on and I'm hovering over the students. There's other semesters where I'm hands-off on purpose and I let like our amazing student interns just kind of run with things. And again, just sit back and just marvel on what they can do. But there's times where I think sometimes the engineers say, okay, how do we keep this train on the track? Right. And they want to keep it on the track rolling. And my job is to kind of figure out how far off the track I can get it without crashing. And so that's the best way to kind of sum up that approach. We question things just like engineers do, right? But we question
Right.
and we mix and we meld and we transform creative ideas. And so, a lot of it's conversation, a lot of it's obviously with the creative direction is just giving the students the idea of the big picture, and more importantly, getting them in there, working with different disciplines, having their own moments. My moment made me stay, and I'll stay as long as they'll have me. But the students need to have those same moments as well. So again, that's a big part of it. And to make sure that they're there not only to benefit them, the student interns, but they're also there knowing that there's a bigger purpose and that, we're out there helping a specific community. And so, we have an amazing group of student interns that are, like I mentioned, 9 different colleges, over 50 plus interns, which has been amazing. We've grown, but it's something that, I don't think I had that experience as a student. And, they get that professional development. They get that kind of in-house. They're being stipend and or paid for their creative work, which is also a very big thing at Limitless that we do. And, you know, that's the pretty amazing part. I get to talk to engineers, researchers, my games team who are awesome. I get to talk to our PR team, and it's just a bunch of different minded individuals that just, you know, those experiences don't often occur, right? Like we're either in a room with all graphic designers or we're in a
Right.
room with all animators, but you know, rarely do we get this kind of back and forth bouncing. So again, I think I have one of the greatest jobs in the world, and you know, I'm inspired every day by the amazing people who are really doing the day to day work there at Limitless.
That's awesome. Um, let's back up a little bit and take us back to the actual creation of an arm,
Of
and
the arm,
from
okay.
of the arm,
Let's go way
and
back.
way back, and how you mentioned a little bit about how the students or the bionic kids can customize it. But let's back up a little bit and try to figure out the creativity, or discuss the creativity of what it is to create that arm, and through the process of engineering all the way through the process of designing it, decorating it, customizing it, and until it gets to the child.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole like you just touched on. It's a whole series of different industries and different jobs, and you know, you have the medical community in there. So we're talking about physical therapy. How does this arm fit? How is it weighted? You know, what's it doing to their shoulder or their back muscles, right? So there's that whole design process that you know a lot of people may not see, and you know, there's a lot of stories out there even um, that sound horrific, but you know, you want to look at it from a growth mindset. There are people who are trying to help people, and they like duct tape arms to people,
Mm.
and they think, well, I'm helping them, I'm making an arm. But the idea is we have to involve the right communities. So once we kind of understand that side of things, you have the industrial engineers, the mechanical engineers, kind of building the core, building the structure, the functionality. We want it to be modular. In other words, when you know my son, for instance, is 4 going on 5, he's grown exponentially the past 2 years. Just every couple months,
Right.
it's like boom. And so we want that arm to kind of, if he were to receive one of those, to fit him and to grow with him. So we need to be practical about that and create pieces that snap into each other and you know move about that way. When it comes to the design, you know, the same thing. The weight of the sleeve, the theming of the sleeve. You know, we want it to look cool, but form and function. We go back to the age-old question of design. If there's a bunch of spikes on it, right? Like we're making a Nintendo arm, which we don't have. If Nintendo's watching, feel free to please contact us. But like if it's a Bowser arm, right? Nintendo.
There you go.
You know, you're gonna poke yourself, right? And these are kids, and they will find a way to do everything under the sun with that bionic. So yeah, I think you know that's just the starting point. Then you talk about 3D modeling. You have amazing 3D modeling programs that you know we conceptually create the design in, and design meaning two things: the visual design and then the CAD design. Both of these. On top of that, we're making video games like you see on the screen. We're making video game controllers that all have those elements in them as well. So it's user experience to its full extent.
At
So
what point do you at what point do you invite the child or a child of focus group to be part of that, figuring out the weight or anything like that?
So that's evolved over the years. I think you know the admin team at Limitless has learned a ton since that first arm, even before the Iron Man arm, involving the right parties, talking to the right people, getting your user feedback. Again, any design really, you know, when you're designing for other people, you need that user feedback session. What we do now is we do clinical trials. So we've kind of shifted the conversation to include more of the doctors and the hospitals to select individuals that would benefit from this device. And in turn, you know, that's going to group things and make it go a little slower, but in the long run in the future, it's going to help when we do decide to expand, right? When we do decide to, you know, maybe, you know, shake things up and adapt the product a certain way, we'll have the right research and data to do that. So now you're pulling in like data analysis and studies and trials, and So one of our trials that we're doing soon is we're actually using MRI to see if the video games that we're creating to help train for the arm are actually helping the learning of the arm. So something changing in the brain when before they have the arm versus after they have the arm. So we're really involving the full scope of what this university and the country can offer when it comes to this research. So yeah, that process changes, and some clinical trials will have a dozen kids come in. Other clinical trials may be a little smaller, and they're going to be varied in ages and ranges. I know we've been very cautiously, in a good way, wanting to explore veterans and folks like that. But there's a whole new slew of benchmarks and design challenges that we need to be thoughtful of before we just go, hey, here's an arm, right? And that's important too. I think designers often, and maybe from the outside looking in, I think all designers know we do this, but people who look at artists and designers go, oh, well, they're creating, decorating things, right? Mm-hmm. But we are doing it with so many layers of thoughtfulness, with so many audience members in mind. That's what truly becomes, that's when you've kind of elevated your design magic, I guess we would say, right? You're incorporating all of those different elements.
I love the fact that it's gotten to a point that the kids are actually part of the design process, or at least the focus group. I can only imagine that some of the kids are like, can you add a launcher for like a ball launcher or something like that?
Oh, there may be a projectile. I can't use
Really?
the brand, I guess, but a projectile toy gun. Famous toy guns that shoot projectiles. There may be one in a prototype floating around in the office. But, what the kids do, I remember, the first time we created a video, we made a bunch of little video games for the kids to learn how to use the arm with when we first started. And most of them weren't great, but there were quite a few, one or two that were actually really, really decent that the kids kind of went to. But the kids would pull me aside and say, write this down. That's how they would start the sentence. And they would give me, like, this is the story. This is this character's name. This is, where they came from. And, we would just like listen. We would just listen and absorb. And the next iteration, that's where we got a lot of our characters and a lot of our, we listened to our audience and their feedback. And then, they would talk to us about how they like to play video games, or why their current video game console doesn't work with their limb difference and what we could do better. That feedback is invaluable. The idea behind Limitless is we are not the voice at all. Designers really aren't the voice, are they? They're the microphone. We amplify. And to amplify something, you have to listen. And that's huge, right? And so no matter if you're the engineer or the creative artist or the social advocate, all of that starts with listening, starts with, the why. Why do we need this? Is this important? Is it helping people? And, how do we evolve that? Eventually it stagnates, right? All design. Then you have to, kind of recycle and rewind and rinse and repeat.
It's funny because I've been in that room when some of the kids have visited, and the amount of energy that they bring into the room. And it's true. I mean, they have a very specific outlook on what they want, how it should work. They're like having your most frank creative director. I tell you exactly, a lot of kids, they don't have like the filters. So they just like are very frank, but the amount of like feedback and energy that they bring, and it's incredible. And it's so like gratifying in a lot of ways. You touched on something earlier on in our talk, and I know that we've talked about this outside of this talk a lot, but one of the things that always strikes me, going back to the collaboration, is what the different disciplines come in. And my first introduction to actually being in the lab is when you and that team were working on the games, the video games, to help the students, to help the kids work their controllers. And I still to this day don't understand really the science behind it, but I just found it amazing how something fun was also education, and the kids were learning without really realizing. So can you talk a little bit about the games that you produce at Limitless and what they do with the students or with the kids?
So the big irony of that, especially with me, and there's a couple of the presidents and vice president over at Limitless will nod and laugh if they hear this. But when they originally approached me, it was to design arms. And, I've done 3D modeling. I don't think I've designed an arm ever. I've tried. I've given them to the engineers and they go, no, get out of there. But at the end of that conversation, I'm a child of the 80s. I love Nintendo. And I mentioned Nintendo twice now. Look at me. But, the Power Glove of Nintendo was cool. And the first thing I thought was, oh, like we should make this a video game controller. And they were like, yeah, do it. And so I was like, cool. Yeah, we'll do this. Yeah, we're going to make a video game. I didn't make video games at that time. I didn't make video game controllers. I've been very gracious to have, and a friend of both of ours, Victor, but Peter Smith, who's been an amazing research partner with me throughout the years. And he was the yin to my yang. He could, do all the programming and the game theory. And I went to him and I said to him, like, hey, man, I kind of promised we could do a thing. Can you make a controller that flexes, that, breeds levels of muscle flex? And he goes, okay. And like very nonchalantly, he's a genius. And so again, surrounding yourself with people who don't think like you think is very important. And he, we then decided to kind of make these prototypes. And so the game, essentially, if I asked you to flex at 50%, your flex at 50% may be different than my, 75-year-old mother's, right? And that's okay. But how do you calibrate that when 50% does the point or the open and close? So we need to switch between gestures. So we want them to hit little benchmarks, and the video games did this. Now, why are the games important? To answer your actual question, when you play Mario, turning into a weird ad for Nintendo, when you play Mario and you fall into the pit, typically you're frustrated, but you keep playing Mario, right? You keep going, I'm going to come back. I'm going to do it again. What we don't want to happen with a 6-year-old receiving a device, something that is pretty technical and bionic, is them to try it. It doesn't work. It fails. And then they never touch it again. We've seen this happen. The video games are to give you, I call it sneaking in the vegetables, right? I'm a big Karate Kid fan. The Miyagi, paint the fence, stand the floor, karate. The same thing with the video games. When they put on the arm, they're like, oh yeah, I know how to use this. And we say, hey, do the arc shot from the one game, or do the bionic blast. And they flex at that same rate and it does something to the arm, and then boom, right? It's connected. And they're kind of like, oh, that's that thing. And that's why I practice with that game. I get it. And then there are a lot of subpaths with the game. A lot of kids told us, they don't have games that are designed for them. Holding a controller with 2 hands and 2 joysticks, for instance, is completely, they really have to make some adjustments. I met an amazing individual, Keith, in Canada once, and he is a person who uses a wheelchair, and he will use his feet to play video games and his mouth. And, there's a lot of adaptability. And so one of the things with our controller is we want to one day, hopefully, implement that to game designers and people, and make it available for everyone to kind of, oh, I have limb difference. Let me plug this in. That will replace this specific button. So again, there's those long-term goals too, especially when you're designing for accessibility and different communities. So, yeah.
So it's a side-scroller game, just to describe it to everyone, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
So there's a couple. If you can imagine, like Matt said, Mario, it's a side-scroller game, and depending on how much you flex your muscle, you can either jump a little bit, you can jump high, you can do other things, you can do other activities like shoot things or
yeah. So there's different powers, right? You unlock different stages of power, which ultimately will turn into the different gestures down the road. What you'll see on the screen is it's a lot of UI UX, right? On the screen, there is going to, and you can see it here actually in the picture. There's a little pink bar at the top that is connected to Juliana's controller. Now, this is an older picture. These are all Bluetooth now, and you can kind of see some of the leads, but that will, depending on where you flex, it will hit certain areas. So the bar will be full bar. That's 100%. Right now, it looks like it's around 30%. There
Cool.
at the top. This is fancy. We're like zooming in.
Thanks, Ryan.
And then we also have a calibration that calculates resting muscles. So what our muscles are moving all the time, whether we're actuating them or not, right? So there is a little bar at the beginning that will kind of customize where the rest is on an individual. So somebody like my friend Keith will not have as high of a resting muscle than me because, or somebody with ALS is a great example, right? They may only have access to their temporalis muscles, and we have a game for that too. So we have games for, that are 3D side scrollers. We have endless runners. We have platformers like you're talking about, like the side scrolling platformers. We've recently worked with both Unity and Epic. We've been very fortunate to receive funding from both of those companies to support student creatives to create games across platforms. That's huge, right? Because we want not just one thing that they can make. We want it working on your phone, your tablet, your computer, ultimately maybe even the Xbox and the PlayStation, right?
So do you find the students, the kids come naturally to it? Ryan's asking the question, how do you explain the kids how to map the muscles to use the game? Do they come naturally to it, or is there some explanation involved?
Yeah, it's a lot of UI. It's a lot of, the first time, obviously, when they come in, we throw a lot at them and the parents, like, this is how you hook it up. This is how you charge it. And so we do have multiple meetings with them virtually and in person where, we can go over those things. Also, our staff at Limitless, the full-time staff is available, at a drop of a phone call to talk about those things. But in the actual game, it's a lot of UI. It's a lot of like you start with a calibration screen that's like, make a flex of 100%, hold it for 5 seconds. And then like, it will kind of auto give you an area of like, this is your flex zone. Right. This is your peak. This is your lowest. This is where you would go. And then it just guides you right into the game. So, web design right there. We had to pull in web design. We've it's really cool to see also, when I say that, I think of one of the students, Jason, who helped us with that. Jason's pretty active, I think, on Jason Ferry. Jason. Yeah. He's at Naughty Dog now doing game stuff. And he was one of the first who was like, he basically, as an intern, was like, I think I can make this flex controller do the whole menu, like just by flexing a muscle. And every single selection he built, and it was so intuitive for the 6 to 17-year-old. No wonder he went where he went, right? Like he just kind of like figured that out. So I take no credit for any of these things, right? This is all our amazing. That's why you bring people who think differently in.
So did those user interfaces, user experiences have to go through a lot of different reiterations to kind of get it right?
Yeah, and it's not done. Nothing's ever completed at Limitless. The bionic arms will change. Their designs will change and evolve depending on working with adults or with children. That's going to change. The content of the games will change. So design is a constant transformation and reiteration, no matter, in my mind, that's just my humble opinion. Like if you just design something and go, oh, it's done, never going to look at it again. That's boring, right? Like, I've never seen a creative design one thing and then like go back and say, I'm done for my life, right? Right. We want to be pushed and challenged. And that's why I think in my mind, I love doing stuff like this more than maybe just industry commercial work, right? Because I can see the growth of the client. I can see their impact on the world and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So we've just got in another question that I think is a great question. Do you ever find yourself playing a game, like just some random game, like a temple runner, and find yourselves like, that's your inspiration to like, we need to add this into our, can you give us an example of what that could be?
We have a game, Limitless Runner, which is a great question. But Limitless Runner, you can download it on the App Store and test it out. But Limitless Runner is based on a runner, like Endless Runner, or like a Temple Runner, pardon me, or Temple Run. The idea is there are games for addictive repetition, right? So think about the gym, right? You go to the gym and you're not going to want to deadlift. I know you do, Victor, when you go to the gym. You just deadlift the most weight possible. Me too, right?
I try.
But you're not going to max out. You're going to do small reps here and there. And then sometimes you're going to max out. And then other times you're going to cycle through different activities. Training games are no different. But we need to say, okay, what's fun? What does, my kid not want to put down when he plays a game? Because this is their homework for their clinical trial. So we do have to make it appealing. And then it gets boring, right? You play an endless runner so much, you're like, yeah, I got it. Like Guitar Hero is a great example. Like you get it, you get it. And you can put more songs in it, but eventually it's just kind of run off. Oh, there's Limitless Runner. Yeah. This is cool. This is Ashley the engineer is the character. And the character has a bionic limb. And we even have my favorite, I don't know if we ended up updating it in the app, but we do have a wheelchair character in the Endless Runner, which is pretty cool. So they have a little rocket pack. So when they go to jump, it goes. So again,
That's
just
awesome.
trying to include folks in media. And that's another big thing, right? And Victor, I know we worked on some projects about this. Most depictions of limb different characters in media are Captain Hook. They had a tragic accident, right? Bucky Barnes on, in Marvel. It's never happy, right? And so what we want to show is that anyone with limb difference, or really anyone with a disability or anyone in general, can be a superhero. They can be the hero. They can just be born that way. That's okay, right? Oh, you were born like that? Great. You don't have to fall from a train or get eaten by a shark. Those people that's happened to, that's fine. They have to deal with that too. But we want to represent disability in a positive light. And here's Zachary. What about a leadway here? But Zachary, yeah, this kid has done. What is he? 16 now. Has done some pretty amazing things that you and I actually got pretty involved in.
Yeah, so it's a good segue to how some of the kids have gotten themselves involved in what we do. So Zachary wrote, him and his brother Christo and his family created and wrote a character that we created a comic book of. And I'll let you tell the story because you tell it so much better than I do. But can you tell us a little bit about that collaboration with one of our bionic kids?
Yeah, so Zachary really was the catalyst of my Limitless moment. A while ago, there's a picture of me and Peter hooking him up when he was a little kid to a video game, and there's a spot where he just lights up, and that was the moment I actually knew when I left that event. I need to be. There's Ashley Taylor in the background. Adobe Live. Say hello to Adobe, Ashley.
Say hello to Adobe, Ashley.
There it is.
Lunch
right
delivered.
there. Yeah. So, that was my Limitless moment. He lit up. I was in tears when I left this event. And so what Zachary has done is he said, I want to help other little kids. And his dad, Nico, who's an amazing father, like, again, an inspiration for me being a relatively new father, and just what a guy. He said, okay, guys, well, what do you want to do? And they go, well, we want to make a comic book. And so they wrote us. I mean, Victor, if we had printed it out, it was probably this thick we called it the manifesto. And he created a comic book about a hero who's just born with limb difference. Wasn't tragic. He's the bionic kid. He was born that way. And I once again said, yeah, we're going to make you a comic. And then I went, oh, I don't make comics. This is what creative directors do. I have so many talented people around me. I'm very fortunate. But there's the comics right there.
There he is.
So I go to Victor and I said, Victor, I've kind of signed you up for something that may take a couple years. And, we graciously went through and worked with Victor, and he's been so kind. You've been great at this. But we created these 2 issues. And the idea, and I'm going to spoil this, but the idea behind this comic was, in the end, Zachary realized he doesn't need his bionic arm. We solve problems in the comic without violence, right? We solve it through, kind, resolute. The villain becomes a hero as well. We touch on some mature subjects, and this was all from the mind of like a 10-year-old. And he was often approached about why his arm is different. And, there's been parents who little kids have asked them, will your arm grow back like a starfish? And the parents go, you can't tell him, ask him that. But Zachary's like, yeah, that's a great question. And so it opens that conversation. But the cool thing about it, and I'm kind of skirting around it, this young man who's 16 and his brother, I believe, is 18 now, they have raised $20,000 from this comic book. They have not only raised
Wow.
$20,000, but that covers 2 kids to be in a clinical trial. So him and his family have been single-handedly responsible for paying it forward for other people to have that same limitless experience that Zachary had. That's amazing. He has gotten actors like Michael Rosenbaum, Lex Luthor. They're like buddies, right? Like they're like best friends. He's gotten him involved. Dominic Sherwood from the show Shadowhunters, an amazing individual who's been involved with us. These, again, bringing people together because of the why. And that's Barry. Everyone's probably wondering, the dog. The dog is Barry. Barry's in the comic book as well. But again, just this is the impact that design has. And whether you're doing something like Limitless or you're doing something, you may feel is not huge and impactful, I promise you it inspires and it influences other people. And, your design and your creativity have massive weight on how this world could be a better place in general. And we need that these days. We need that positivity, that advocacy, that, that empathy in our designs.
I love the fact that Zachary and Christo and Nico, they're all kind of involved in it. They're telling their story. They're kind of telling their story from their own points of view, and they're getting involved in trying to help somebody else's experience be so much better. So that kind of like collaboration and advocacy is just so important, so amazing. Which again is a good segue into my next part of the question in the time we have left. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to pivot and talk a little bit about design for good in general, and possibly talking about the importance of doing this kind of design, finding your group, finding what you can do, how you can help, the power of design, and maybe talk a little bit about what you've learned and what you could advise to other people that are thinking of helping different communities in the same way that you have.
Yeah. First things first, get yourself out there. The cool part about where we are in a world today is that, we're a Zoom call away, right? There's Victor, you mentioned a great meetup. Honestly, like it was like after this or something where the AIGA and other organizations, get yourself out there, start talking to different people, start listening to what's out there. Find something you're passionate about, right? Find something that is not just about the money, right? We started with nothing at a kitchen table, and understand that, even a little bit goes a long way. I think those are really good starting points. And, don't be afraid to ask, to reach out, to say, hey, I do this. What do you need? What can I do? Right? I've learned also with working with we're working with rocket scientists, right? That humility is important, right? I don't discredit my own abilities, but I also, I may not agree all the time with the rocket scientists, but I welcome all those conversations and those ideas. And I realize that innovation typically doesn't happen when we just all agree, if that makes sense. Right? I'm not saying we like disagree and have, but you need friction to start fire, right? And those conversations I love, because I know I'm in it with people who care. And if you find people who care about something that's not themselves, those conversations are easy. Because in the end, whether you agree with them or not, you agree with who you're trying to help. And so find those commonalities. And again, this is just life advice, right? Find commonalities with people you disagree with.
Right.
And it's going to make it a smoother process. But I think getting yourself out there, don't be afraid to ask, and understanding that things take time. When I started with this group, they were in a closet in the engineering building. Due to Adobe's help, they're in a 6,000 square foot manufacturing lab now, their own kind of building. And that did not happen overnight. That was a lot of conversations. Victor, you were a part of a lot of those with Adobe. And we met so many creative individuals and fellow advocates who we've just amplified this mission. We just got back from Adobe Max, where we talked a lot about how we use Firefly, and we're which is considered disruptive technology. I love that term. But just like 3D printing, we think about, okay, yeah, there are ways that can be used for good, and obviously all technology can be used for nefarious purposes. But how can we use it for good? How can we help impact creativity and inspire communities using this newish type of technology? So that was really exciting. And again, just having support from companies like Adobe is huge.
I love the line that you need friction to make fire. One of the things that you and I have talked about, and I've talked about this with Alberto, is that I'm a big proponent of the ridiculous idea. And I think a lot of our great, the things that we love came out of a ridiculous idea. Disneyland, they told Walt Disney that Disneyland, an amusement park, is a ridiculous idea. Stick to movies. The iPhone was a ridiculous idea. And I asked Alberto if anybody tried to discourage him and tell him that this was a ridiculous idea. And he said, yes, everything worthwhile probably starts from a ridiculous idea. So I would add to what you just said, to pursue your ridiculous idea. If you feel strongly about it, go do it.
And the loudest voice in the room is usually the one who's not the right person. That's what I've noticed too. And those people go, it's wrong, it's bad, it's fixed mindset. And I've learned anything is possible. And I don't see any idea as impossible. I just see it. We haven't done it yet, and we just need to get the right team to figure out the solutions for it.
Yeah. Find your people, find your collaborators, and make it happen. And I would also add to the students, and you can kind of add to this if you can. A lot of times we're looking to build our portfolios, and I don't believe in spec work, but I believe in pro bono work. So if you find something that your nonprofit that you feel strongly about, volunteer your time, because chances are they're going to need it in the same way that Matt was able to help this particular organization.
I haven't received a paycheck from Limitless. I mean, I work for the university, obviously, so I guess I do get a paycheck. But it's about my students. It's about getting them funded. And again, you mentioned not spec work. It becomes it's pro bono. You can get things other than money.
Yeah.
I'll word it that way. I get peace. I get peace. I don't know how else to word it. I get calm. I get, when I was in the hardcore professional industry working on, do this Jumbotron, do that, do this, I had stress. I have shifted that mindset, and I get so much fulfillment from being a part of something that is bigger than me, that I see Zachary and folks like that, and Annika, who's our intern at Limitless, paying it forward to that next generation. And it's not about me anymore. And that is better than any paycheck, honestly.
Yeah. You're changing people's lives. And just to summarize, I don't know if we kind of glossed over this at the beginning. You're supplying these arms to these kids free.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've had
they don't have to pay for it.
Yeah. Adobe, Autodesk, I'm going to say the other name of the company that on an Adobe Live, all these game companies, a bunch of philanthropy from some very amazing individuals who are seeing beyond their own needs, right? And any part of the trial, the kids are covered for hospital stays. They're covered for hospital visits, I should say, hotels, flights, everything is covered. And, those donations go straight to that. And then we also have the amazing companies like Unity and Epic who have helped support through grants, and Adobe as well through philanthropy to help pay undergraduate students for their creative efforts, which is huge. And, provide them licenses and software. And it's just, these places seem big. And, I always say we don't work with companies, we work with people. And it's so true, because even at Adobe, we could name some, and let's name them all, but we can name some amazing humans that we've met, Victor, that we're better people because we know them.
Absolutely.
And, so yeah.
Well, thank you. If people want to find out more about Limitless, can you tell us your Instagram as we wind down?
At Limitless 3D. Limitless, Limbit LESS 3D. There, that's hard to spell out. Yeah. And we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, Facebook. There's a YouTube channel up there as well. You can also search for 3D Hope, which typically gets some pings for our website and whatnot. But yeah, it's awesome to be included with individuals like Victor and Ashley, who popped in. I'll give her some credit too, in the background, but who just, you know, continue to inspire me and continue to, you know, I try to surround myself with people who challenge and inspire me. And Victor, you're one of those people. So
thank you. Matt Dombrowski, I feel like we can keep talking and keep going and all that stuff. I appreciate your time. I appreciate Adobe having us. So, and thanks for joining us today. I think there are more programming coming on after us. So please stay tuned for that. So be brave, be bold. We will see you next time.
Lisa Carney next, right?
Lisa Carney's next. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ryan, for being an awesome producer, and Andrew Hockrattle for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.